Stanley presents, oh, hey, that's me, The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones. Excelsior.
Welcome.
It's time for The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones.
Some of the greatest adventures of my life are sitting in this museum.
Big deal.
Pack your bag, grab your passport, and prepare to go globetrotting with Dark Horse Comics' classic four-color adventures of Indiana Jones.
Oh, your teacher.
Part-time.
Mr. Henry Jones, Jr. of Princeton, New Jersey.
I like Indiana.
We're named the dog Indiana.
Now, what shall we talk about?
Now, welcome once again, IndyCast listeners and further fans to The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones. My name is Joe Stuber.
And my name is Keith Voss. And Joe, have you played the game yet?
I have.
Have you
I
played
haven't.
the game
No,
yet?
I promise I'll play the game. Look, I'm just. I'm getting ready for Mitch's convention. It's well, depending on when this airs. I've got so much going on.
You might be hanging out with Short Round.
Hanging out with Short Round. I'm hoping to. We're hoping to do some of that. I know there's possibilities of some IndyCasters all coming together, a confluence of IndyCasters.
I wish I could be there,
right?
guys. I really do. I really wish I could be there. I mean, hey, guys, just do me a favor. Just somebody make sure, The Tale of Short Round by High Adventure plays for
I'm sure they'll be playing it at some point during the weekend.
Please play. And also, if someone can grab me his autograph, I'd appreciate that. I mean, Mitch, please, do whatever you can do. Shorty's one of my favorite characters. Great rant on Shorty last show. Great job. So if one of you guys can nab me, please, a Short Round autograph, I'd be forever grateful. But Joe.
Yeah, a lot going on. So a lot going on. Yeah,
lots happening, and just when we thought we were done with Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, not quite.
No, there's plenty of time for me to play the game because we were going to go to Thunder in the Orient, but a pleasant surprise.
Yes.
A pleasant surprise happened. We ran into somebody who decided to take a seat at the VIP table in the Raven's Nest.
That's right.
Today. So yeah, we definitely have. We talked about this in our review. The writer, Bill Messner Loebs. And we talked about this. So go back and check out a review of Fate of Atlantis if you haven't already. You get the whole backstory on the writing and the artwork and all these different things. He wrote the first issue. He plotted the remainder of them. It was a crazy story. The game was in flux.
We found out some really interesting information about the creation of the game. I mean, it was almost a little bit of a bombshell to me. Some of the things that Bill mentioned in the interview. So, guys, I mean, here it is. What do you say we head on in and talk with Fate of Atlantis writer Bill Messner Loebs?
Our very special guest on the IndyCast today. He is a writer who definitely knows his way around the world of superheroes and rugged adventurers. He had a fantastic run with the Scarlet Speedster on DC Comics' The Flash. He created the character of Artemis during his time with Wonder Woman. And he has the distinction of helping to bring Indiana Jones into the world of Dark Horse Comics with Fate of Atlantis. He is Bill Messner Loebs. He's here with us in the Raven's Nest today. Welcome to the IndyCast, sir.
Well, thank you. Boy, I want to meet that guy. He sounds really interesting.
Well, yeah, he sure does, and we're about to find out a little bit more about him today, it seems.
We like him. Yeah, my goodness, we talk about some of these runs on some of these classic characters. We're going to get into the world of Indiana Jones. I know it's one of your favorite characters of all time. I'm kind of interested, and Keith and I have talked about this in many different interviews, but for comic book writers, for comic book artists, what were your inspirations? Do you remember the first comic book you ever read?
Probably not, although I remember things like the incredibly frustrating Superman time travel stories from the middle 50s. I was born, it seems to me I found an old comic once, which would have been now 30 years ago easily, but I remembered having read it, and it was a 1956 comic of Superman.
Okay.
And since I was born in 1949, I must have been reading comics when I was 7 or so.
So you're kind of introduced into those wacky adventures of Superman when things were getting a little bit crazy.
Yes, and in fact, Mark Waid once bought me a whole bunch of Superboy adventure comics, where he had a collection of alien hands and alien heads that were haunting him in his Fortress of Solitude. And as I was reading these various stories that are just so completely bizarre, I realized, this is where I came to love surrealism. Well, it wasn't Ionesco or any of those guys. No, it was Mort Weisinger. The biggest thing I can remember looking at the bottom of a house ad that said it had a long red streak in it. It said a cheetah can run at 60 miles an hour. A hurricane is 1,000 miles an hour, but the Flash is faster than all of them. Read in 3 months when the Flash comes out.
Oh, wow. So that made a big impression on you early then.
It did, and so it was so thrilling that I actually got to write the second installment, essentially, of the Flash's adventures.
Okay, so were you a big Flash fan? I mean, you had followed the first run, went through, and then you had all that in your head when you started your run?
Pretty much, okay. Yes. There was sort of Marvel comics in between. DC had a sort of a quiet period when I was, in my 20s. We were all reading the X-Men, of course, the Micronauts and the Savage Sword of Conan. So I was reading those, but my early life was all revolved around Superman and Batman and World's Finest, where they would team up improbably.
So would you say that maybe Superman or Batman or even the Flash were your favorite comic book characters? Or did you have, I mean, as a reader, or did you have someone else in mind?
Well, they were the only comic books. In fact, I'm probably one of the few people that never read, for example, Archie comics. But yes, Batman and Superman, I was a big fan of both of those.
How did you first get into writing comics?
Detroit has always been a big hotbed of comics. We had one of the first comic book conventions, and when that happens, the next 10 to 20 years, you have a huge batch of comic book professionals that come out of the area. And the way that expressed itself was a whole bunch of kids doing their own comics, usually an anthology, and we would each contribute 5 or 10 pages to the comic. And then you would make the pilgrimage up to Jeppy, and he would say, well, you're not quite ready yet, kids, but, maybe we'll be able to carry you next year. And so we would go home, and we would give all of our friends one issue of our comic, and then we would get 10 of them in usually our local drugstore, and then we would take the other 99 and put them in our garage, and then we would start saving up to do the next comic. So I did that for a while, and then one of the comics that I was doing, one of the amateur comics that I was doing, we had the originals, and we were showing it off at a comic book convention, and it happened to be a comic book convention in Canada, and Dave and Denny Sims saw it and asked me to do a backup in Cerebus, which I did, and that was successful enough that they then asked me to do a backup or to do an actual book, and that was Journey.
Okay, that's the Adventures of Wolverine McAllister?
Yeah. And so I did that for about 3 years, and then people liked the writing. And I was first asked to write Johnny Quest for Kamiko, and then
Which you won an award for, I thought, right?
I was up for several awards. I
Okay.
was up for an award as best new talent at San Diego, but I was up against Steve Rude.
Okay.
Good
Good company to be in.
Yeah, for sure.
Good company, and so that was, that was fine. I finally won an EPOD award for my general output.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought it was interesting too because you talk about Journey and Wolverine McAllister. Keith and I read in an interview, sort of the Indiana Jones character worked his way into that because of your love for the character. Your fondness for Indiana Jones goes back to the beginning, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I was in a small comic book company in East Lansing, Michigan, called Power Comics. And as it happened, that was the year that Star Wars hit, and then the next year it was Raiders of the Lost Ark hit. And so whenever we were not doing comics, and we were trying, because of the peculiar way the comic book company was run, we were not really that interested in doing books. And so we would go down to the local movie theater and watch Star Wars. We watched Star Wars about 30 times that year. And then when I was on my hiatus from the company, I used what little money I'd been given to take all my friends out to see Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I got to see that 5 or 6 or 7 or 17 times.
You sound like the rest of us.
Yeah, that's right. No real final number there.
So I loved that, and when it came time to do Journey a year or so later, I was thinking, what would be the good thing to do about this? How could I take some out this without actually copying it? What would be good? And I said, really I said to myself, the part that of Raiders of the Lost Ark that everybody really remarked on was that 15-minute prequel where he's running away through the caves and the collapsing floors and all of that, and he's running away from the giant boulder. And I thought, how could I do that to start out my comic? Well, I couldn't, because at that point everybody would still remember the giant boulder.
It's too close to it, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
But and especially, Michigan is a forested land. It isn't. We've got hills, and we've got really tall hills, and we've got, but we don't really have mountains here in Michigan. And so it was also hard to imagine how you could get a boulder balanced up on something that would then fall down and chase him. However, he could be chased by a bear. And in fact, the bear chase is the one thing that everybody remembers from Journey. So I guess I at least got that part right.
So you got the spirit of the character.
Yes, always about the thrill of the chase. Very exciting stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And of course, Indy had a very distinctive hat, and by an odd coincidence, Wolverine McAllister has a very distinctive hat. Also, even though it doesn't seem like it, there was a lot of history. Indiana Jones, part of the thrill of the character was the fact that there was a lot of history. He had been working for the university for 10 years. He had villains and friends and a lost love. All of this was part of the Weltanschauung of the character, and it's what made the character, I thought, have more depth to it, especially in the first movie. Here he's up against a villain, but it's obviously a villain they've been going back and forth for years, stealing things from each other.
And the same thing with Marion. When he shows up on her doorstep again, and you know that there is just this long history. The long friendship that he's had with Marcus. It really does bring so much more depth to that movie, to know that there's this other kind of lost Indiana Jones movie out there that where all this took place, where Marion's father was his mentor, and all these things happened, and it really put your imagination into overdrive, and that's something I also really respect about the movie is really the history of all the characters.
Yeah, and the fact that the scriptwriter, who eventually did Grand Canyon and
Lawrence Kasdan.
Lawrence Kasdan, and everybody says, oh well, the next three movies were not as good because of one thing or another. But nobody ever says the next three movies are not as good because Lawrence Kasdan wasn't writing them with that weird offbeat poetry that he had. I mean, I've never heard a better description than the desert is 3 weeks in every direction. Or that long sequence where he and Marion are quasi fighting just before she gets attacked by Nazis. And I always thought, wouldn't that be great? I've had breakups with my girlfriends who were all sort of snippy at me, but not after 10 minutes afterwards. None of them were attacked by Nazis, so I could save them.
So you can make that dramatic entrance.
Yeah, you didn't have to go in there and rescue her after that either.
That's certainly a different way of watching the film, that's for sure. Well, obviously, you love the character. You really investigated the character in all those viewings of the movie. How did Fate of Atlantis come into your life? And when I say Fate of Atlantis, it really wasn't Fate of Atlantis that came into your life, was it?
No, it was at that point. It was the keys to Atlanta.
So you were getting the keys to the car.
I was, and it turned out I was actually approached by Bob Schreck, who was the he was sort of the unofficial editor-in-chief. And actually, I had just about decided to do a contract, an exclusive contract with DC, and I gave it up to be able to write Indiana Jones for them.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a huge move.
Yeah, for sure.
But I knew this would probably be the only chance I would ever have to write Indiana Jones. So I just couldn't not do anything else,
Mm-hmm.
Were you familiar with the Marvel Comics run before you started to get work on the new Dark Horse series at that time? Did you go and check out any of the other Indiana Jones comics, or did you only use the movies as reference for what you wanted to do with Fate of Atlantis?
Yes, I only used the movies. I was only vaguely aware of what Marvel was doing with the character at that point. Almost everything that Marvel did at that time tended to be more turned into a Marvel comic rather than whatever it was they were adapting.
Yeah, that's something that Joe and I have talked about a lot on the show, actually, that, a lot of like indies, the writers that were in charge of the Marvel run, kind of turned into a little bit of a Spider-Man character. He'd throw out these kind of like, funny quips that didn't seem very much in character, in line with the character of Indiana Jones, and it just kind of seemed like that was popular at the time, so that's what they decided to throw into the comic book.
Yeah, I did feel that. Just in general, you really had to have a strong writer in order to avoid that Marvelization. Sometimes people were good at like most of the adaptations of Conan at that time were reasonably good, but it didn't really seem to. They did an adaptation of Gladiator, the Philip Wiley pre-Superman superhero that really didn't seem to catch the spirit of that book either. So it never really occurred to me that I would enjoy the Indiana Jones adaptation.
Well, and you mentioned at the beginning of the interview too, when we were talking about Fate of Atlantis, you mentioned that wasn't the book that you set out to write, or that you wound up writing. What was the book that you wound up writing?
That was not my intention when I made that reference. I just meant I was given, we were going to be writing Indiana Jones and the Keys to Atlantis, which was an adaptation of this game.
Which wasn't even really finished yet at the time.
No, that was an interesting and amusing sidelight. The game was not only not finished, it actually wasn't started.
Okay. Oh. Okay.
And what they said was, well, what you should do is talk to the guy who's writing the game, so he'll be able to tell you what's what, and how you can, what the names of the characters and the whole overall feeling, so you'll be able to read your writing.
Which was Hal Barwood, yes?
I believe it was, yeah.
Okay.
And he was very nice. It turned out he was writing late at night in California. So I had to be up at like 3 o'clock in the morning in order to be able to talk to him on the phone. And sometimes I couldn't even catch him then. But then I found out that isn't how you write games. You don't write games the way you write comics. What they had were the sort of mechanism. They had the algorithms for the game. But they hadn't yet decided what those algorithms were actually going to do, except they would be somehow keys to Atlantis. But in terms of the names of the characters, who the characters even were, how many characters they were going to be, they knew that there would be globetrotting involved, but they didn't know what countries they were going to be going to. This made it a little more challenging to be writing a comic about this. This is why we comic book writers get the big bucks, after all.
Of course they do.
Because there are all these challenges. So I had to come up with names for all the characters. This was, as we always say, my first mistake. Because at that time, a really great situation comedy had come on the scene. And I knew that, this was not going to be published for another year. But I figured, situation comedies that I like never actually last. So I might as well just do this. And I decided I would quasi-immortalize the names of all the characters by mixing and matching them. With their real names and their names in the series and so forth. It would just be my own little thing because nobody was even going to remember the series in a year. Did I mention the series was Murphy Brown?
Nice.
So Murphy Brown and Indiana Jones has a connection.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought?
And at the time, by the time I was actually writing this and turning in the scripts, Murphy Brown was a worldwide sensation, and everybody knew the names of the characters. And it turned out that Dark Horse and Lucasfilms were not amused by the fact that I had used even the names in this sort of broken and mix and match way. And I got a stern lecture for that.
Really?
From who?
From Diana Schutz, who had gotten a stern lecture from somebody else.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was, and everything went wrong at that point because I had gone to Texas for a convention, and I got an ear infection, and I got stuck in Texas, and I was having to be on heavy medications because, so I'm trying to write this thing, and I'm really not feeling good because I'm in constant pain, and I can't leave. Because if you leave, I knew this because my wife had tried to fly with an ear infection and had lost most of her hearing. And so I was desperately trying to take my medications and then fly home and not break my eardrum. So that was going wrong. It turned out that Dan, remind me of the name of the penciler.
Dan Barry.
Dan Barry. I think that's just the fact that I've completely tried to forgive this section of my life. But
glad we could help bring it up.
Yeah. Well, Dan Barry was Mike Richardson's favorite from his past, much the way Will Eisner was for me. So I really understand the impulse to do what you have to do in order to have Dan Barry be your penciler. But what was happening was Dan Barry was the penciler, and then he was the inker. And then he was the colorist. And then he was the writer.
Okay, that's what we wanted to ask you about, because I know you basically wrote issue 1 and you plotted 2 through 4, correct?
Yeah, I was made sort of a semi-consultant on the book after Dan took over the reading.
So what was your relationship with Dan Barry and working the story and then working with Hal Barwood and trying to come up with some type of coherent story that we could send Indiana Jones and Sophia Hapgood on?
I did the breakdown of the stories and sent off and the names of the characters and where they were going to be going and how it was going to work. And that had to be all cleared by him, by Barwood at Lucasfilm.
Okay.
And so that was how I essentially ended up kind of writing the game, too.
That's one thing Keith and I were curious about, too, was like how much of what you were doing was influencing the game.
The game, exactly.
Well, because there was no game, except for the algorithms. I guess it influenced it quite a bit.
Wow.
That's what I was told anyway. And since my friends were all sort of being thrown out of work by the fact that, Dan was doing more and more of this job, and I was sort of shunted off to a siding on the side, Dan and I never really talked. Wait, I think we had one sort of, professional chat about it over the phone, but he sort of felt like he knew what he was doing, and I sort of felt like I knew what I was doing, and poor Diana Schutz was trying to coordinate all of this.
Okay. Well, you had pretty much laid the template out there in the first issue, and let's talk about some of these characters, because we've got Jerry Travers, which was kind of cool. He's not in the game, student. And then Sophia Hapgood, who Keith and I had mentioned is one of our favorite characters. Now, did you create the character of Sophia, or had she already been developed for the game?
No, that was mine.
Okay.
I had a friend.
Great
actually,
character, great female character, by the way.
Thanks for creating her, because she is a great character in the Indiana Jones universe.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I was trying to come up because Marion Ravenwood is like so different than every other heroine in movies up to that point.
Yeah, she really is.
And I mean, and then they tried to come up with, how do we vary from Marion with our other heroines, and they just made them more traditional.
We also heard somewhere that Marion was originally supposed to be included in the game of Fate of Atlantis, but was not included. If you would have been able to include her in the story, how would you have incorporated her into Fate of Atlantis?
I don't know, because the other thing that was happening was I had a friend who was making his living, or part of his living, his sort of avocation, as a psychic. And so he was giving me sort of the inside dope on how psychics did cold readings and that kind of thing.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting.
So that was how I actually knew what to have Sophie do. And in fact, my friend, I sent him a few like the script to show him what I had done with what he had told me. And he said, Bill, I'm actually kind of planning on making my living this way. You don't really need to tell everybody how you do cold reading.
Your friend was not a fan of Fate of Atlantis.
That's not huge. Not a huge fan. But
okay.
he was a good sport about it. At the end, he tried to put a curse on me, but other than that, he was a big fan. And so that was, but I was looking around for something else besides, what Marion had going for her that I could give to Sophie that wouldn't just turn her into a cookie cutter heroine either.
Did you ever get to see the final product of the comic, or did you ever get to read it beginning to end?
By the time we got done, I was not that curious, because everybody by that time was pretty tense about everybody else, except possibly Dan Barry, who didn't know any of them. And I've actually, I've signed it at conventions and I've sort of flipped through it. I don't think I ever did actually sit down and read through it. I'm sure they sent me my 5 copies.
Okay, that's what we were curious of, if what you thought of the finished product, because you obviously laid the groundwork with all these great characters in the first one, and then just kind of guided them through. And when Keith and I reviewed it, we were kind of like 2 and 3 felt a little video gamey in the respect of you got to get this thing and you got to put this piece of the puzzle and this piece of the puzzle. So it was almost like maybe Lucas Arts was driving the bus at that point of, okay, it's got to be video gamey. Does that seem like a fair assessment?
It does. I think it would have. I don't. It seems to me somewhere along the line somebody said something like that to me.
Okay.
But you have to remember, I was also pretty sick during this period.
Well, we're just kind of figuring, what your take on the whole thing was when you saw it all together. Because then you've got Atlantis. Now, did you get to see any of the Atlantis part, or did that sort of match up with your vision of how you saw it? Because we've got these aliens coming in. I mean, it just really kind of gets bug nuts crazy toward the end there. How much of your warped sensibility from 1950s crazy Superman comics worked its way into the aliens in issue 4?
The God Machine itself was just, brilliant stuff.
Well, I think Dan did a real good job of designing this, because you have to remember, he didn't have a lot to work with either. Right. It wasn't like, there were a lot of images. The images are the last possible thing that they create in the video game. And so I think he gets a lot of the credit for what these things look like. I think what I was trying to say was, as I recall, these were 4 stones, and so I was in whatever incarnation of my script people ended up working with. I was trying to say, this is this should be sort of rug and rock-like, because you've got these are supposed to be stones, but I don't know what people would be hearing from, because they may have been at that point starting to design the images for the video game, and they might have wanted something that was a little more mechanical looking.
Was there talk afterward of you writing any more Indiana Jones miniseries for Dark Horse, or were you kind of just burned out on the experience after all that?
I was never asked. previously, one of the pitches that I'd gotten from Bob Schreck was that yes, this would be a continuing. We would have a chance to turn this into a continuing series, much like they did with the Predator Alien thing. But once everything had happened and everybody was feeling kind of, bad about everything else, I think everybody we were just glad we'd survived the experience. My impression was that Diana Schutz got kind of pushed around, too. And so I'm sure she wasn't too eager to jump right back on the horse.
No pun intended.
No, I was just... you beat me to it, Joe. No pun intended.
So, the other problem, if you were to ask me if I ever read, most of my own issues for Flash, or if I ever read the issues that people wrote after me on any of my stories, I would say no. Almost no writer. I've never known of a writer who actually kept reading the book after he finished writing it.
You're too busy working on the next one.
You're too busy writing on the next one, and you're not writing it anymore. And somebody set control over all this stuff you were doing.
I hesitate to ask, but Keith, I haven't played the game, so I feel bad, but I hesitate to ask. Bill, have you ever played the game?
No.
Okay. See, there's two, Keith, and this is the guy that created it.
All right. This is like he said, he created it, so why would he have to play it, Joe? You need to play it because it is a masterpiece in the Indiana Jones canon. Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. It was a big deal when it came out. I mean, especially the game.
Bill and I can hang out and we can play the game together.
Yeah, I'll feed you guys tips if
he can walk me through it.
Sure.
Then we'll read the comic when we're done.
He knows the story. He doesn't need any tips from me.
We talked about it. We like the series. We gave it a positive review. It was fun to kind of go back and reread this one, and it's one of Keith's favorite stories. Period.
Definitely.
So we owe that to you.
Well, thank you. I brought a lot of energy to it, and I did my best to be professional about it, whatever problems were happening. But
it definitely shows. I mean, that was a point. After the third movie had come out, we weren't sure if we were going to get any other Indiana Jones ever again. I mean, the trilogy was finished at that point. The Marvel Comics series was finished at that point, so we just didn't know. Is this it? So the fact that we got anything Indiana Jones, especially him going to a location as famous in history as Atlantis, that was a big deal.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of it that way. But yeah, I was, as you can imagine, having given up a contract and all of that, I was a little disappointed that how everything turned out. But as you also point out, there's really been no point in my comic book career when I was not writing 5 books. It was 5 different books. It was, and sometimes it was the equivalent of 5 books or a book like the Batman newspaper strip that I wrote for a while. But as a result, I was pretty tired during most of this.
Well, we know that obviously Disney and Marvel have the license back now. We may be getting some more Indiana Jones comic books. If that were the case, would you be interested in tackling Indiana Jones as a character again?
I would. I would be interested in doing that. I would be interested. Weirdly enough, I would love to do it with Diana Schutz as my editor again.
Wow. Okay.
Because we had a great time. We had a great time when I did Johnny Quest with her. I did the Jezebel Jade miniseries with her. And she was always my favorite editor, really. I'm going to get calls from my other favorite editors, of course. But,
You can have some dinners to buy here pretty soon.
yeah, yes. But, you know, and she never really had a chance to do the kind of editorial stuff that she was so good at. And so I think we both deserve another shot at Indiana Jones.
So if you did get that other shot, what would you want to do with the character? Is there a special time period you'd want to see Indy in? Would you do the script and the art, or one or the other? What would you want to do with Indiana Jones at this point?
Well, I'm completely aware that my style is not a style which lends itself to catching, you know, true likenesses of people. And that, you know, that would be something that whoever we worked for would want to see. They would want to see somebody that looked like, at least relatively close to a young Harrison Ford. So I don't think I would want to try to do the art. That's also a lot of work. When you say there are 5 different kinds of alien spaceships and a Sioux raiding party and a large jeep coming over the hill, that takes you 5 seconds to write. but it takes you a month and a half to draw.
All right, so you're just doing the scripting duties. We figured that out. Where would you set the character? What kind of era? What would you want to do with them? Or are there some Bill Messner Loebs scripts floating around in your man cave somewhere? Some unpublished Indiana Jones scripts that we don't know about?
No, there are none of those.
Okay,
but I think when people were wondering what the second movie would be like, I had it in my head that he would be doing urban archaeology in New York City, where they've found something in New York City, and so they're trying to excavate it before they put up the new building, because, you know, there's always a lot of construction in the middle of New York. Mm-hmm. And so I had this image of Marion Ravenwood, because of her connection to her father in Indiana, who's doing this, and all of a sudden she's attacked by some sort of scavengers. And out of the top of, and she's down in the sewers trying to do this archaeological dig. All of a sudden, the fedora comes drifting down right in the middle of the fight. And you say, ah. And then in comes Indiana and starts laying into people with a bullwhip.
Nice.
But I never got really beyond that. It just seemed like a new opening for him.
Well, there's the maybe the teaser sequence there. Maybe Marvel and Disney will come a calling. We could get a new miniseries from Bill Messner Loebs in the world of Indiana Jones.
I'd be there the first day it's released.
I'd sign up for it. I'd sign up for it as well. Hey, let's talk about what you're up to now. Latest projects you're working on, and how can fans find out more about it?
Oh, well, right now I'm working with Arvell Jones and Keith Pollard, who are both Detroit guys, and we've started a new comic book company. And instead, you've heard of steampunk, which combines science fiction and the Victorian age.
Yes.
But this is, we're calling this Steam Deco, which combines the 1920s and sort of robotic, steam-powered science fiction. And so we're just in the process of assembling a team and putting things together.
Now, is this Keith Pollard, one of our favorite Indiana Jones cover artists?
Possibly.
I think
Arvell and Keith were working for Marvel while I was working for DC, and
Keith did some work for Marvel. He did some of our favorite work for Marvel.
He did some great covers for Further Adventures.
Okay, so we've got the cover artist for the new Indiana Jones Adventure series. We've got the writer for the new Indiana. We've got the editor for the new Indiana Jones. Keith, I think we've got it all done here.
I think that's it. All they need is a script.
All they need is a script. And we've got Indiana Jones and Marion in the sewers doing some urban archaeology. I think we're halfway there.
I think so.
We'll only take 10%, Bill.
That's great of you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Keith did some amazing covers for the Run and Further Adventures of Indiana Jones. So it's very cool that you guys both got to come at the character from different angles.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear it. The problem is when you're working on comics full time, it cuts drastically into the time you have to read them.
Yes. Exactly.
There's never enough time to read comic books.
It's true.
Hey, what are the websites? Where can we find out more about you?
What I would do is I would Google Arvell Jones, whatever new things that are coming up for us in our new comic book company. It will be on his website. Mostly, I think if people just go on, look for me on Facebook, I will be trying to introduce whatever new things that I'm doing. I have a couple of conventions that are coming up in the Detroit area, and then I'm going to be at the Grand Rapids Con in October as well.
Oh, fantastic. So people are there, they can come out and get their Indiana Jones book signed?
They certainly can. That's what I do. I go from town to town, signing books and fighting evil.
And writing great stories in the process. So we'll get those links out there. Bill, I thank you so much for this adventure. It's Keith, that's one of your favorite stories, isn't it?
Definitely one of my favorites. I mean, it was at a time, like I said before, when Indiana Jones, we got the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles on TV, but you weren't sure if you were ever going to see another adventure with the Indy that we knew and loved at that point. And Fate of Atlantis, very, very nostalgically a very a big favorite of mine. So thank you so much for bringing that adventure to us, to all the fans. We all appreciate it. We appreciate your work. Thanks again.
And thank you so much for joining us on the IndyCast today.
Well, I'm going to be looking up IndyCast from now on and catching whatever interviews you get from other people, because I'm now a fan.
Thank you. We were a fan of yours first. We were a fan of yours first.
Right. We'll get another round of drinks here in the Ravens Nest before we wrap it up. So, hey, thanks again.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Indiana Jones and Murphy Brown. I would not have put those two together.
Who knew, right?
Who knew?
I mean,
the things you find out on the IndyCast and Further Adventures. Come on,
that's
folks.
That's a question. How do you connect Indiana Jones and Murphy Brown? Well, there's the answer, folks.
There's the answer. So big thanks to Bill for joining us on the IndyCast today. That was fun. I enjoyed going. Yeah, looking forward to getting into these miniseries. But again, so nice to go back and talk to some of these folks who were there. Not always the greatest circumstances when these things were coming together. We definitely ran into that in the Marvel years. But all these years later, we get these really cool adventures. We looked at this. We've got Indiana Jones in some crazy cool environments. We got snow. We got underwater Indiana Jones. We've got maybe Indiana Jones in a sewer coming up. I don't know what. Look, that'd be so cool to get these guys back on this book again. Very fun interview. We enjoyed
it was a lot of fun, and we thank Bill again for taking the time out to talk to us about Dark Horse's first Indiana Jones tale. So
it's nice to have somebody who's a huge fan working on the book too, because you could tell that passion. You can tell when you're reading it. But when he's talking about it, he knows the character. I mean,
a big part of Indiana Jones history is, Bill Messner Loebs. There he is, and we had him in the Ravens Nest. It was an honor to talk to him. It was a lot of fun, and we really, really appreciate him taking the time out. Hopefully, we'll see him again real soon.
Hey, let's check out the mailbag.
Mister, get your arm out of that mailbox. I mean now.
Oh, dear me. I haven't had so much trouble delivering a package since the incident in Vienna.
We heard from Ron Phelps, who wrote in to say, just wanted to say how much I enjoy your segments on the IndyCast. Wish I still had my comics. We wish you did too. Go get.
They're still out there.
They're out there. They're
still
cheap.
out there.
They're cheap.
Go
you
get
get the
'em. Go
reprints, the Dark Horse reprints too. It says, by the way, have you seen this tribute piece artist John Hahn did of issue number 1 of Further Adventures? It's in the current issue of the Indie Mag. Keep up the good work. Hey, thank you. We shall. We shall keep up the good work. We're going to plow through the Dark Horse years.
Yes.
Keith, we're going to be doing that. Keith, what did you think of that? It's posted there on the Facebook page.
Yeah. We got
it's in the Indie Mag.
This message from Ron Phelps on the Further Adventures Facebook page, and pretty cool stuff. I mean, we'll post it up there for everyone to see. I mean, come on, what can you say? It's a tribute to another great cover. How bad could it be? It was pretty.
And Junior's got the Indie Mag. They have a Facebook page.
And Junior's doing a great job as always.
Yeah, so go check that out. And hey, we really love hearing from you listeners out there. Keith, where can they send an email?
Well, you can get in touch with us a couple of ways on the Further Adventures of Indiana Jones Facebook page, or you can write us an email at thefurtheradventures@gmail.com. We'd love to hear all your thoughts on anything Indiana Jones, especially having to do with comics. So send us an email, guys. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, that's it for the day then.
Well, that is all the time we have for today. As Indiana Jones says, he's telling us to wrap it up, Keith. We've got to wrap it up. But
yeah, unfortunately. But unless someone else gets thirsty and stops by the Raven's Nest, Joe, you and I are going to be tackling the 6-issue miniseries Thunder in the Orient.
I'm looking forward to that one. That's going to be a good one.
Me too. And that's going to be next time on the Further Adventures of Indiana Jones.